This is 10X Recruiting, a podcast from MetaView. Let's get after it. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of 10X Recruiting, brought to you by MetaView. Siadhal, what's up, man? It's good to see you. It's been a couple weeks.
Good to see you too, man. Yeah, last time I saw you, you were in a hot tub, I think.
That is true. That is definitely true. And let's keep that part of the recruiting retreat recap to ourselves. But for everyone else, I do want to share like a couple of insights from the retreat. So for people who weren't there, we brought together 45 of the best people in talent. This is across multiple industries, but a lot of AI conversation. We did it in 2 days at the Blue Sky Resort and Lodge in Utah, which was impeccable. We took out the whole, and the entire property was ours. Like no one else was there except for us. Which shout out to the MetaView marketing team, gangster move. What were your major takeaways?
My biggest takeaway by far was the thing that we've been noodling on a lot, which is essentially around how do we help head of talents, head of recruiting, like bring the magical capabilities of AI into their organization at scale. Like that was very much top of mind for everyone there too. I think people are actually, funnily enough, I think there's this like, you got to live in two worlds where tinkering, playing with AI, yes, you should be doing it. Everyone should be doing it. Your productivity is sort of your own problem, even as a leader. Like you can improve it with AI tools, and we build a bunch of stuff to help leaders just with their personal productivity. But the biggest thing for sure is how do I chaperone this technology into my company such that how we recruit at scale is changed by AI. And so it's really cool, obviously, to hear people talking about how they are managing to achieve that. But I think it was just really cool to see how the conversation has moved on, basically less about what sort of like playing around the edges can we do with AI, and more thinking about transformation. And I think less almost like fear of what will my company think if I make this change, and more fear almost of what will my company think if I don't make this change, if I don't invest in it. I think there's been a tipping point there where it's now like the fear of missing out is like much stronger than the fear of like taking some action that backfires. I think people are much more okay with that. So that was my biggest like vibe takeaway, I would say.
Yeah, so I have three. That was one of mine. The way I would describe that takeaway was there's only a couple of people in that room that are actually getting scaled leverage from AI. To your point, I think there's this scale versus experiment thing that's going on right now. And a lot of the leverage right now is candidly happening for like people like me. Like I'm a one-person shop. I can vibe code my own shit for me, get it up and running, be okay with like a couple things that I know are broken or that are breaking in real time. And it doesn't bother me. Like, we had Cassie on the pod recently, and that's what her and I were talking about. I was like, well, we're just like teams of one. So we're just building for us. Who cares about anybody else? But it turns out in larger organizations, you have to care about everybody else. You can't roll out AI that's half baked to a talent team of like 40 people. It just like doesn't work. You need shit that actually works. I think the thing that was surprising for me, and maybe, you have a different lens given what you're selling every day, but for teams that are like 30 plus, there's very few people who are getting like real leverage, especially for homegrown AI tooling.
Yeah, I say very few. I say there were like some loud voices. Like we had Greg, who was at Coinbase for had amazing sort of like tour of duty at Coinbase, where I think that was like that stood out to me because it was very deliberate. It was very, I think, one, environment in the company where there's a top-down expectation that we're going to reinvent how this work gets done. And then two, and so that's why as well as being like, I'm sure like a great persuasive operator, Greg in himself, like that's one of the reasons he was able to like really wrap a serious project around adopting AI. And then two, just the sort of the deliberate objectives they had around adoption, I think helped a ton as well. So I think there was a few like standout cases where people like clearly had, but still with an understanding. My point is more still with the understanding that they think they're like nowhere near finished. It's literally just like this is the work for the next 2 to 5 years is to figure this out. And like the sort of the sad or happy reality, depending on your preference, is the longest pole in the tent are the people. in these companies, the people in your in these people's teams, and getting this change affected through them is the work that everyone is starting to sort of cotton onto.
So that was my first takeaway. My second takeaway was actually on the candidate assessment side. Everyone's still trying to figure out how to test for AI fluency. Like, there's not like oh yeah, we have this figured out. Like, of the 45 people there, I don't think anyone feels like, yes, this is done. We feel really great about this. That was actually like one of the bigger discussion points that I didn't anticipate was, okay, great. We now agree company wide, we need to have AI fluency be something that we assess for in the interview process. How do we do that? Like,
Yeah,
it's still not clear to people.
I've actually, and I'm glad you raised that because I realized that was actually a really big takeaway for me because it's changed that realization at the retreat and in other places has changed my hiring strategy because I've realized that yes, there's some baseline AI fluency you should expect, but I actually think it's not. I think, so you should assess everyone for it in the interview process for sure. But I think it does make sense to have some people who you hire specifically to turn your company AI native, even if you're an AI company yourself. I don't think like AI system design is going to be at the top. I'm not saying you can't be like good enough to do damage, but it's not going to be at the top. And so, do I want to run a company that only has people? And like, I don't care if you're amazing at relating to people. I don't care if you're amazing at sort of like getting a sense for what the buyer's sort of like, unspoken hesitation is, or I don't care if you've got amazing taste with the design. No, I want to hire those people and I want to wrap them in a system that maximizes their leverage. And I think in a world of abundance that we're in, frankly, it's not scarce. It's not like I can only hire one person, therefore they need to be able to do everything. I can hire multiple people. Actually, I want people who are dedicated to AI enablement and keeping us at the. It's a full-time job to stay at the bleeding edge of AI, and I can't expect everyone in my company to be that because A, not everyone wants to be. B, there is amazing, really important, usually like very human traits that these people have that I want them to focus on really nailing. And so we've literally started to hire now for people on the go-to-market and GNAI, not non-product and engineering side, where I do expect everyone to be like very native, where we have dedicated people within these functions whose job it is to like transform the workflow. You can't be a seller with a really big quota and be the person expected to transform the workflow of sales at the same time. It doesn't make sense. Maybe you can. It just doesn't make sense for me to make that bet. I'd rather just separate it into two separate heads.
I think that sound that I just heard was like a collective sigh of relief from people like me who like, yeah, dude, I know enough to be dangerous, like I'm okay with it. I can spin up like initial concepts, but getting something like production ready is very different than toying around with initial concepts. And that's actually where I feel like I am. And I feel like where a lot of people are today. It's like, cool, you guys told me to go use Cloud Code. Did it. Like, check the box. I got in there. I created a shitty app with a good idea and a shitty production app that I never want to go back to again because it's going to take me so long to do. And that's just like not my zone of genius.
No, exactly. I actually had Dan. Do you know who Dan Shipper? He runs a company called F,
Yeah.
and they have a really
Yeah, of course.
good podcasts and stuff like that. He was on Lenny's podcast, and he was talking about how he thinks it will be quite one-to-one within companies where you'll have a person like maintaining an agent or like a system of agents, or whatever, is a full-time job, and so like you
Yes.
have to constantly be thinking about what context to feed it, and is again, it's going to take a certain human skill that is like going to be really in demand. To be clear, if you are this way inclined, you should really lean into being this person because you're going to be incredibly in demand and incredibly well paid, most likely. But it's not everyone's job to maintain agents and constantly sort of like keep them up to date. It just doesn't make sense.
That was one of the learnings I got from Greg. And by the way, we should be clear, we're talking about Greg Garrison, who had an amazing tour of duty at Coinbase, who's now between gigs. But what Greg was saying was Coinbase, because they had a mandate top down, they also had resources. And those resources were dedicated to solving this whatever, specific project that they were running or thread that they were pulling. They had somebody running that, and that was the thing they were doing. They weren't doing 5 things simultaneously. And I think the rule with AI that we have a little bit forgotten, especially that I hear in some of these like hardcore companies where it's like, oh, we get so much leverage out of AI. Everyone's amazing here. Like, I'm sure you guys are, but humans are still human. We can only do a couple things well simultaneously. And to your point, building and running an agent, like that is, I mean, I've been trying. It's hard. Like it needs to be more of a focus, and I don't have the time. I think for you to say that style is really powerful. Okay, last learning from me. I think like I describe this as like what's old is new again. So we had a special guest who came and talked to us about how they do sourcing. And essentially, the way they do sourcing is like hiring a private investigator. So when you're building out like a very niche thing or hiring for like a new org, or you need to go to like only there's like a couple of companies in the world that do this thing, you essentially treat every call as like a breadcrumb. And everything ends up feeding back into this master knowledge sheet to where like we're as a recruiting team, if we need to go build out a very specific project with only a couple people in the world doing it, we need to like go actually build the org charts for each of those companies. And the only way you can do that is actually leveraging the recruiting team to inform and update the data set that we're using to go mine from those places. This is what recruiting used to be before LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn, and I grew up in the era of LinkedIn recruiting, so I put myself squarely into this category. I think it kind of made us lazy. Like, I could just go on LinkedIn and type in VP at MetaView and, find Mark and like go send him an inbound.
Yeah.
And then I'm done.
And it's sort of like
But like,
there's two.
it's
The
different.
side to it is obviously there's a certain ilk of candidate that wants to be discovered, and therefore, yeah, very easy for you to discover. I mean, who's the VP of sales at XYZ company? It's like people want to shout about it. And then there's this obviously the sort of there's other types of recruiting where actually it's much more inscrutable, much more opaque. Obviously now Anthropic, for example, they have some like very high, well-known people who are on the members of technical staff. But the reality is they have like 1,000 people or more, whatever, that are just member of technical staff. You got no idea. And that's, I don't know how deliberate it is by them or by the candidate or whatever, but it makes it much, that's now like you need to sleuth for the information of who's the actual impactful people here. It's not transparent based on the titles.
And that's it. It's so interesting because with all this talk about AI killing recruiting, which I think is so fucking untrue, this is actually exhibit A for how recruiting will be more valuable in the future. Like the only way you can get that information is you're talking to somebody and you've built such a relationship with that person that they've trusted you and decided to spill a little bit more of the beans maybe than they should have. And then that informs the next conversation, and you're using that data to get more out of the next person, and so on and so forth. And I thought it was just like a reminder for me of like, oh, yeah, like our jobs can't, like when people say strategic recruiting, this is now what I think about.
Related, and it's not an anti point to what you just made. The person that no one's referred to is like a well-known company with a great brand and like all these sorts of things that can they can't recruit whoever they want. They're in a very competitive space, but anyone they do try and recruit will damn sure know who they are. Bigger point was going to be is it's noticeable, I would say, of those the companies with amazing employer brands, including very forward-thinking AI native companies with amazing employer brands, are behind the curve in a lot of AI adoption. Not like very far behind the curve, but like they are behind the curve. And that's because it's like necessity is the mother of invention. They don't need to. They have enough cash to throw bodies at these problems. And, if we don't have these butts and seats, we won't be able to hit this number. And so don't think about transforming how you work. Whereas actually, if you speak to folks that are more on the almost like a bit more steady state as a company, and they are seeking these efficiencies. Actually, that's where you're seeing more of the innovation in at least the efficiency side of recruiting, I would say. So I think that's like another. A lot of the people at this retreat were more in the sort of the first bucket of like amazing companies that many people on the planet would love to work for. But you had others that were like at a higher level of maturity, maybe like still amazing, compelling companies, but maybe just less sexy, not the ones who are like and this sort of thing. And they tend to be from not necessarily from in thinking further ahead, but just practically on the ground. What is actually happening? What are the expectations placed on the team in terms of how many recs per recruiter are they expecting to bill? How tightly do they manage time to fill and therefore do work to improve it? And AI is a really good solution to that. Just the necessity creates the the creativity. And so I think that's really interesting as well, to sort of have a world where, funnily enough, the most innovative companies are not in many ways the most innovative. They have the most innovative product, and that almost means they don't have to have the most innovative processes.
Maybe the foundation of like how I felt walking out was, oh my gosh, okay, great. I'm not the only one who is feeling behind. I actually think like everybody feels behind. Like we know we can be getting more out of it, but we're not. And to your point on the largest companies specifically, Sal, you're exactly right. Like they actually are not as like on the cutting edge as some of the call it small to growth size companies.
Feeling that you're behind, I think that, like, I think it's good to have a healthy dose of that anxiety or paranoia just in life, really, as long as it doesn't over sort of like overcome you. Um, I think that there's not some secret. Do you know what I mean? There's not some secret population of people who have cracked this and are doing their work in a totally different way. Like when I look at our engineering team, yes, they are incredibly AI forward. They are, I would put them up against any team on the planet in terms of how much leverage they have from AI. But it's really well documented. There are dozens, maybe even hundreds of teams across the planet who have stopped writing code. They get agents to do that for them. Their work has transformed. There are not dozens or hundreds of recruiting teams who have essentially stopped doing the work of recruiting, and AI is now doing it, and they just haven't told anyone yet. Like, there's, we are the ones designing it, and also it's not going to look exactly the same, right? Because if you ever do feel that sort of sense of why is like engineering so far ahead, which is something I wrestle with sometimes. The reality is that I can ask an agent to build me a product, and I can ask it to build 20 versions overnight. I can look at them and say they're all rubbish, throw them away, and literally no harm done other than a little bit of wasted cash on tokens. Whereas if I say to an agent, ping me 200 candidates and ping each of them 20 times with it, I literally can't do that. There is a limiting factor, which is I can only get the attention of this human, which is the target of my work, like one time, maybe in the next month. And so I have to get it right. The trust just is so much higher that you have to have in really using AI within recruiting, because again, you cannot just ask it to do it again because that candidate is now burnt. I know it sounds very simple, but that is the practical limitation. I would not be willing to have an AI agent again just like randomly spam or like randomly create messages and then I check after if it's any good. So I have to stay the bottleneck in the case of recruiting. And our job is really to figure out, where do we start to release the bottleneck a little bit? Where do we hold firm? How do we get to the point where you can trust the AI, which is why we obsess so much about context, because the only way I'm ever going to get to the point where I will trust an AI to, you know, frankly, maybe speak on my behalf or something like this, is if I have really great confidence that it understands all the things I understand, talks the way I talk, so it heard me talk hundreds of times, whatever it might be. And so that's why we obsess with this context. It's sort of like really coming home to roost, I think.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's the CEO of MetaView who's saying that. So I think it's important for people to understand, because they're like I've gotten pressure from founders who are like, why aren't we using more AI? And that's the reason why, is because you have to be precise, and trust is built over years and ruined with one message. So that's well said, Sile. All right. Well, those are our recaps. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Sile and I will see you guys in a couple weeks. Peace.
See you.